I'll just introduce myself to get started, and I'll be facilitating our panelists and our roundtable today. My name is Tara, and I do customer success and community management and some course facilitation with EduFlow and with EduFlow Academy. And I'm super excited to have William and Luke and Kate here today. And I thought it'd be fun to just have each of you introduce yourselves, give a little bit of background. Participants might be here because they know of one of you, but not all of you. So yes, who would like to go first? You can just jump in.
William.
Perfect.
Just right into the fire. So my name is William Cronje, and I think the big thing I'm doing at the moment is working at EduFlow and EduFlow Academy as an instructional designer and program manager. Shout out to everyone who has ever been in an EduFlow Academy course. I see a lot of familiar names in the chat, which is really, really amazing. So thank you everyone for coming to all of our experiences and creating value together. That's really great. EduFlow Academy's big goal is to we want to change the way people think about what learning is online. I think a lot of people have this association that an online course or an online learning experience is just a video and quizzes. But I think it can be so much more. And we really are trying to, in the Academy, promote all of the different ways that we can do that, especially in a social way. We like the fact that we are at the moment 144 people together trying to learn something, for me is remarkable. And whenever I'm in these big sessions, my favorite thing is to see the chat and to see what people are talking about. And I always want to download and save the chat history because the resources people share is just remarkable. So yeah, that's, I guess, my introduction. I'll throw the ball to Kate, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. And first of all, thanks for having me here. And I'm a huge fan of EduFlow. And, while you just shared all the nice stuff that you are currently, making great job in, changing some perception of how learning can happen, probably the same stuff I'm doing in the microlearning field. I'm a learning and development professional with a marketing background and with a really huge passion to microlearning. And I'm a founder of 7 Tabs. Just a very, very quick words of, self-promo, the #1 microlearning platform. And I'm a creator of microlearning conference called Microlearning Conf. Feel free to join our free events and learn all the case studies, nice techniques from the best names in the learning and development field. Probably that's all. I love giving micro, and I'm just, giving the word to Luke.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kate. And hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Luke Hobson. I am your certified learning nerd. I love to be able to talk about instructional design. I'm a senior instructional designer and program manager over at MIT. I also make a lot of content on the internet about instructional design with a blog, a podcast, and a YouTube channel. And I wrote a book called What I Wish I Knew Before Becoming an Instructional Designer, which is essentially like your learning nerd career guide type of map through this entire instructional design field and sharing us what I've learned along the way. And some of you might know me from EduFlow Academy because I'm one of the facilitators inside of there where we talk about backward design, or you might see my course about collaborating and building relationships with SMEs. So that is a little bit about me.
Well, I guess it was unfair, Luke hosts a great podcast and you're all guys, so very kind of prepared for great presentations and public speaking. So I'm not a professional public speaker. Probably, my ideas may become, messy because of that and pronunciation, but I'll try to do my best to, share my views and insights about microlearning. So I'm just so very sorry for, kind of a, not being that high level of, presentation skills as my opponents today have.
No, you're doing great. And I love to keep things more casual and keep things more like we're not in a webinar that's kind of stuffy. We're having a conversation with some friends around a table. And so that's perfect. I love it. So I'll talk a little bit about just how this is going to go. But before I do that, we would love to spend some time, like in the second half, the second part of this, answering your specific questions. And so as we talk today, if you think of some question that would be interesting to dive into with these three lovely panelists, you can just type that in the chat. Doesn't matter if it has to do with what they're talking about or not. I'll grab it. I'll kind of be hiding in the background on the chat, and I'll grab that and I'll put it into a Q&A list. So feel free to send in any questions, things that you're thinking about as we discuss today, but that'll be our second part. The first part is I've created some questions about microlearning and deeper learning that we're going to explore. And so I'll ask a question and then I'll leave it to our panelists to choose who's going to jump in first. And Kate mentioned the word opponents. We can all be on the same side, but I don't know, maybe we'll stir up a little friendly debate and conversation.
Yeah.
Just gonna fist fight with William in the parking lot after this. It's totally normal. It's super fine.
You'll have to get here first, Luke.
I know, right? A little bit far away from you.
Perfect. Good luck getting to that parking lot. So that's how we're going to run things. And so I'm going to start us off with the first question. So my first question for you all is, what is microlearning and what do we mean by deeper learning?
Well, actually, just for the record, I called you guys like opponents because I thought that it meant to be kind of a, discussion when I'm here for, sharing some pros of micro and, kind of supporting this concept and telling people that, yeah, it can be used and it can be meaningful and purposeful and it can make an impact. And Luke will be here just, telling, oh, no, it doesn't work. Probably. Some different expectations, but that's okay.
I think our expectations are probably going to align a lot more than you think, Kate. So I think we're going to be good. Tara, just to start things off, just to be able to talk more about this, to me, microlearning is going to be an instructional unit that is purposefully and intentionally designed to be short, where it's going to have some type of activity and some type of goal at the end of everything. Where I see a lot of common misconceptions out there about microlearning as far as you can just take a 60-minute YouTube video and let's just chunk it up into 10 minutes and disperse that thing out. And it's well, it's really not. There's no goal. There's no activity here. You're just watching something. So that's really not what I think about with microlearning. I think about something short and sweet, activity, a goal around roughly 5 minutes. There doesn't seem to be a real conclusive definition within the academic literature about how long is micro. I keep seeing a range of things, but to me, it's 5 minutes. And then thinking more about deeper learning or with macro learning, that's what I'm thinking about, much more longer amounts of time, being able to focus more about that permanent change and long form memory, talking about days, weeks, months, years, something along those lines. So that to me is the definition.
And I can actually feel that you, Luke, is a fan of a book called Microlearning Short and Sweet. Are you?
Yes, for sure.
Because I hear some really, very familiar definitions. So for everyone who is interested in the approach, Microlearning Short and Sweet by Carl Kopp and Robin DeFelice, this is an amazing resource I can highly recommend for everyone. It's just a treasure trove of insights, of practical tips and, some concepts behind that will help you understand better how this approach works and how it can be, incorporated into your organization's training strategy. And actually, it's difficult for me to, add kind of something, brand new here. Probably I would tell that being a founder of a microlearning company, of course, I've done lots of research on what microlearning is and how it differs from other forms of learning. And of course, I explored lots of definitions. And my personal one, the one that I kind of use in my head and the ones that influenced the way 7TAPS looks like now is that microlearning illustrates the delivery of training in quick and very targeted nuggets. And it is supposed to have one outcome per activity. just, according to the Microlearning Short and Sweet book, the authors, whom I just completely respect and admire, tell that there is always should be some action and kind of a behavioral change kind of incorporated. And before this webinar, I was thinking about if there could be a microlearning asset that doesn't actually help you change someone's behavior. What if you just deliver some knowledge? Could you call it microlearning? And I thought yes, because I explored some definitions of the learning term, and sometimes they say in dictionaries that it is kind of a transfer of knowledge. Sometimes it's a behavioral change. And not every time you need to actually make learner, to go and do something. Sometimes you deliver some concepts that are the basics of what you will deliver next. And that's also kind of some way to incorporate microlearning. Just some practical example. When you need to use kind of a learning experience to help people understand how some corporate values works. With your first step, highly likely you will create something that describes why this corporate value exists in your company, and some examples of how it can be demonstrated. Probably some scenarios of how other people demonstrated it or misbehaved and failed to demonstrate its value. And in all those assets, actually no action would be incorporated as far as I can see it. It would be kind of a communication. But next, you could pretty well design some activity that would help a person to understand kind of a how-tos, do's and don'ts. And again, you can keep it in some micro format, whether it is 3-minute long or 5-minute long or even 8-minute long. Actually, the duration is not the key here. What is crucial, I'd say, is whether it is relevant to the context, whether you aim at one outcome per activity, I mean, learning activity, and if it is tailored to your learner's needs. So don't really focus about the time, about the duration. Like this could be used as a guide, just to not extend the limits. Like 20-minute piece probably is too much for being called micro. And probably it, again, comes down to the context, to your learning objective that should be very, very granular, and what you have as what you kind of see as an outcome of this training asset. Probably it's too complicated because I'm actually thinking on the go, and if any questions come up, please feel free to ask me.
Kate, I want to actually just jump in because I had the pleasure of creating my first, I believe it's called a tap. Did you call it a tap just now? Like an activity in 7 taps, is that called a tap?
Well, actually, I call it micro courses, and
okay.
Most of our users call them 7 taps, and very
cool.
soon. As you like.
What I wanted to mention was I like how the design of the course creation or the experience creation of 7 taps forces us to kind of adhere to those principles. I was putting together one about like learning objectives and how they work and whatever, and at some point I would get to like slide number 10 and I want to add slide number 11, and it's like, no, you can't do that. You have to chunk it better. You have to be more strategic. You have to be more careful about where you put the information. The text is big, so we can't write an essay on one tiny slide. And I think that kind of like really embraces the philosophy of what you just brought up, that it has to be short. And what I also liked about creating something on 7 taps was that it also kind of like forces us to use casual and simpler language to create something, because it really gets that point across instead of automatically assuming that academic tone. I also want to kind of like bring up a question that Sean brought up about, shouldn't microlearning always be mobile first, or can it be yeah, I see. Kate, would you like to elaborate on that vigorous head
Well,
shake?
yes, just feel free to stop me at any point, because I can be easily carried away while talking about it. You know, there are some myths that I stumble upon regularly about microlearning, that it should be, only some technology used method, or it should be mobile first. Of course, being mobile first really helps, because first of all, microlearning is not only about the duration of the content piece itself. It's also about the time your learner spends on going through it, right? So when you provide some, desktop experience with lots of, uploads and some logins, some passwords, some extra steps and tutorials, and I'd probably not call it really micro, because when your learning asset is 5 minutes long and a person spends, 5 minutes on just accessing that piece of content, it's not really smart, I'd say. It doesn't make much sense. So being mobile first actually helps when you need to, deliver something quickly and make sure your learner can consume it on the go. That's all. But again, it's not like, a rule set in stone. Like, microlearning asset can be a poster on the wall, like how to wash your hands properly in the bathroom. And just imagine you have your hands dirty and you come into the bathroom and they ask you to download an app and to go through some instruction of how to do that, or to open your desktop version of e-learning asset and to learn how to wash your hands properly. Doesn't make much sense. Did I answer?
Yeah, it's a good answer to me. I was going to say, I agree with you.
I feel like we.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Luke.
I was going to say, I definitely agree with you, Kate. It doesn't need to just be on a mobile phone. It can be desktop. It could be in person. So yeah, it does not need to be that. It can be helpful, as you mentioned, but it doesn't need to be.
Definitely.
And if you don't mind, I'll also share a couple of words about deeper learning. While you, Luke, was sharing your opinion, I kind of thought about, again, what we should call deep. Like, is it something that lasts for a really long time, but you can deliver some very kind of simple ideas, but deliver them over some period of time, just because you want. And I would compare kind of a microlearning and deep experiences with, learning, or probably not learning, exploring the English literature and learning how, say, Shakespeare addresses some inequality issue in one of his pieces. And you see the difference, right? You can't deliver microlearning sharing all the English literature, stuff. If Jason Goulet is here, he would probably help me because he is a professor. I'm not a subject matter expert in this field, but you can use microlearning if you need just to dive into some very granular module, kind of distill it to its essence. That's how it looks like to me.
I think that's like the perfect lawyer argument, where you've kind of you've taken the legs out from under the deeper learning argument, because you've kind of said microlearning can be deeper learning, which I think that's like very true, because I'm thinking back at, sometimes you learn a lesson in 5 seconds that has such a resonating impact. And it lasts longer than something that you could have learned in, that you probably wouldn't have been able to learn in like a 3-month-long university accredited course. And I feel like I've got to like just hand over the trophy to you right now, to the imaginary opponent, because I think you've completely won that argument. I'm kind of interested in the contrast of, maybe we can flip it around and say like, and I guess we have done that, but you know, what is still a rich learning experience, but is not a micro-learning experience? I'll maybe put that out to you, Kate or Luke, in case you'd like to add your thoughts.
Probably I'd give the word to Luke if he doesn't mind it.
So I would rephrase something, William, with that. And one of the things that I don't like to go down the rabbit hole is that there has to be a one or the other situation, where the best type of learning experience, I want to be able to marry and combine the two of things. So that to me is when the beautiful thing happens. But when I have to say like that one is better than the other, then that's when someone's just going to clip this and put it on YouTube and saying that Luke thinks that deeper learning sucks. It's like, no, that's not what I'm trying to say, is that we're just trying to put these things together. And then that's when actually it can become incredible. So let me give you an example about something about how I can see this actually being used in like a multiple variety of ways, for instance. So folks, for all of you right now, go down into the chat. How many of you are next to your smartphone? Just give me a yes or give me a no. Wow, shocking. Literally all yeses besides 3 no's. So here is the thing, is that we have this ultimate learning device that's literally inside of our palms right now that we're all addicted to. And right now, the average adult checks their phone 9 times an hour. Now, if that is the case, one, obviously, that's awful. We're all going to have eye problems in the future. This is clear as day. But 2, the other thing is that we have this incredible opportunity to do things in real time because of something from a micro-learning approach, where we're going to be getting a response, a reminder, a notification, a something that can alert you about trying to go forwards with a different type of an idea. So one thing that I heard about before, it was pitched to me years ago, where I was like, wow, that is brilliant. Now, also, this was years ago. I don't know where this ended up with. I wish I could share the link to this one. But one of the things that was taught to me was about how there could be potentially, actually, go down to the chat for me before I go any further. I have another question. How many of you are afraid of public speaking? Give me a yes or give me a no. That one's a little bit more mixed. Seeing a lot more both no's and both yeses. So for those of you who say yes, and Kate, of course, is like, yes, but so for those of you who are saying yes, it's not surprising at all, because some of like the top 3 things when it comes to our fears as adults are probably spiders, heights, and then public speaking. It's probably something in that order. So one of the pitches to me before from a couple of folks was that what they wanted to do was being able to cure public speaking in the workplace. I was like, okay. I was like, what, how, why, like, how's that actually going to work? And they're like, well, haven't you ever attended a meeting before where it just didn't go well because the person couldn't get the right words out? It's like, oh yeah, like that actually is kind of an issue. So what do you pose as far as you're being able to cure that? And what their pose was a form of micro-learning of being able to combine Slack and a calendar app. And what this person would do is that as they're going to be going into a meeting where they know that they are going to be delivering a public speech, they would go and they would flag that. And then once the entire speech was over and they're going back to their desk, all of a sudden they received a notification on Slack that basically said, how did the speech go? Rate it a 5, as in top 10, amazing. That was absolutely fantastic. Or rated a 1, as in you were sobbing uncontrollably underneath your desk and you can never look at your coworkers again in the eye because it was that bad. Now, then what happened from there is that you could actually go and then say 5, and then a prompt would appear and then would say, well, then tell us why. Why was it so great? What are you going to do the next time to keep on building up that momentum and keep on delivering amazing speeches? Or if it was 1 and it was abysmal, tell us what happened. What went wrong? What is at least one little tiny step that you could do the next time in order to improve? And I guarantee that right now, if I had all of you, the 250 something of you who are currently inside of this room, if I put you into 2 groups, and group A had the app on their phone that allowed them to recognize and recall in real time about the presentation and reflect upon that and how it actually went, compared to, let's say, somebody who only had a traditional way of learning, where at the end for group B, I'm going to give you a textbook that is basically how to be a better public speaker 101. I promise you that group A is going to do better because it's a real-time response. You have to think it is actually in your hand. You need to deal with it or in front of you on the laptop. Unlike a book where you can just put to the wayside and maybe eventually it will go away. But obviously, the more you do this, the better you get. You're going to be changing your behavior. It's going to become a permanent thing. You are going to become a better public speaker over time. And then that is one example about trying to take microlearning and deeper learning and combining it and actually getting a type of a tangible result. That's my very long answer for you, William. How's that?
I can actually spend all the day listening to you, Luke. You just formulate everything in such a beautiful manner. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'd also wanted I need to comment that my standpoint on kind of a deeper learning and microlearning is the same. Like the one cannot exist without, should not probably exist without the other. Like you should not try to replace everything with microlearning. There is no need, and it doesn't make sense. But what you can really do is to enhance what you currently have with microlearning and to try to adapt to what's happening in the world, to what your learners are looking for, to what your learning needs are as an organization. And here's where microlearning comes into play. And by the way, I'm pretty sure that most of you folks in the chat, have created microlearning in your lives. Probably not just calling that microlearning, despite the fact that microlearning term is not new. I don't remember the particular year, but as far as I remember, it was first mentioned in 1960s, so pretty long time ago. But everyone, kind of got excited about it a few years ago, and it has become kind of a buzzword. But it's not something really new. And I know in some companies, they call it module-based training or bite-sized training or any other great words, or just they call job aids and how-tos and instructions and training reinforcement pieces. But if you look at them from the kind of a definition, it's all about microlearning. They are short, targeted nuggets. They aim at one learning objective. They are used to support performance, to reinforce training, and to help people, be better at what they're doing at work. That's all.
Yeah, Kate, this is a really great segue into our next question, which you've kind of already answered. I'm curious to learn when you see that microlearning is the most effective. Maybe you have some specific examples of things that you've seen that have been really, really effective, or Luke or William as well. And also, how have you seen it commonly in the workplace?
Well, probably I can start and then we'll just add each other. First of all, as I've already mentioned, training reinforcement, the number one kind of a step you can incorporate easily because you all are doing something, and you must know that, we are, as people, are all tend to forget almost everything if that is not reinforced, just thanks to the forgetting curve. So follow up regularly using some micro assets. You don't need to repeat the concept again and again. You can rephrase it. You can provide with some examples, with some other perspectives on the concept, and thus you help people remember what you delivered. And actually, thus you increase the return on investment, because I can't tell you how many times I have seen that companies have really great content on their shelves and no one actually follows it up, and people don't actually get back to that content because it's really long and you can't actually devote 1 hour of your life just to, do some recap. But with microlearning, with some, nifty little pieces, you can revise that information and make the concept stick. Then performance support, really it lends itself easily to what we call microlearning, because your learner needs something to get their job better, probably to overcome some challenge, some issue, and they are looking for a quick answer. And job aids, some instructions, standard operating procedures, everything kind of falls into that category. And regarding some reinforcement stuff, like you can reinforce not only e-learning courses or kind of modules, you can also reinforce events. And I know that EduFlow Academy will have a nice recap with some recordings from today's session. And I've created some microlearning asset with some tips on how you can create effective microlearning course. And that's how you can recall what we've discussed today. It's microlearning. And you can reinforce almost any learning activity that you'd like your people to be pretty aware of. Probably, Luke, you would like to add something.
For sure. I love everything you said. And also I saw inside of a chat too, talking about the forgetting curve, which we can't forget about, pun intended, because, we can't possibly remember every single thing inside of our heads. We would absolutely go bonkers. It's not a thing. So because of that, we need to be able to forget and to have the reinforcements and to keep on coming back to things. And that's only going to strengthen the synapses inside of our head and to be able to really form those memories. It just makes sense. Now, the other approach I wanted to also talk to you about as well, which Minerva's like literally reading my mind as I'm looking at the chat. I'm going to block out the chat for a second, or else I'm going to reveal all the things I want to talk about because she's talking about all these things. But I want to talk about this too, because Tara, you asked about the workplace. I also want to talk about it too from like an academic sense, because for a lot of folks out there, the thing that really kind of is like still a shocking thing to me is that adults, they don't know how to learn. We remember about how we learned in school, and then we try to be able to apply that as adults. And yeah, so guess what? That doesn't really work. And some of the things that did work, you hated, which is really funny. So go into the chat for me real quick. How many of you liked pop quizzes as a kid? Give me a yes or give me a no. If this doesn't become all no's, I will freak out. Yeah, exactly. One yes. Of course, there's one yes. The thing is, though, it's just like we hated pop quizzes. Well, why did we hate them? Because they were hard. Well, why were they hard? We were trying to actually retrieve information and recall things from weeks ago that we were starting to forget, and then all of a sudden getting a boost. And all of a sudden it's like, aha, I do remember that. And the more and more you kept on doing pop quizzes, the more you were able to reinforce that information and to actually learn that over time. Now, this fast forward to now where you're an adult, and one of the things that you try to be able to do, let's say you're in college or in university, is that you have finals and midterms coming up. And what do? You cram. Because that's what you know how to do. So you try to study everything from the night before. Yes, cram inside of a chat. You study everything from the night before. And if you're like me, I would just drink Red Bull and then stay up till my 8 a.m. class and then hope somehow this information wouldn't leave me as I was so awake constantly. And of course, that never worked out quite well. But that was what we used to be able to try to do as college kids. That's the thing. But then I actually had an epiphany as I was 27, trying to be able to study for my doctoral exams, which for those of you who don't know, it's kind of like a bar exam for doctors. We're trying to be able to talk about three really main critical things. And in my EDD, we had three major topics of leadership, sociocultural, and with research methodologies. And I realized at that point in time that I had to change how I studied because I didn't know how to study at 27. And the idea actually became a form of microlearning, where essentially I would study about one topic, and then once I felt comfortable that I knew that topic, I would move into the next topic. But as I was going through with things, I would actually quiz myself about the last topic's information. So talking about with dates, talking about with author names, talking about with subjects, talking about with quotes, and just seeing how much information could I actually pull out of my head and keep on rotating through all of these topics. And eventually it became insane because of going through with spatial practicing and with spatial repetition. I was able to give myself a buffer of every 2 days or so trying to recall this information. And it was insane about how much information I could actually remember by the time they finally gave me the exam. And it was just a blank Word doc. And they basically said, hey, Luke, type about everything that you just learned over the last 3 years. So it wasn't until my 30s where I was like, oh, that's actually how we learn. But if I had known about that, about how to incorporate microlearning into my educational context, it would carry over into my adult life and, of course, be able to help. And now most of us struggle and just keep on thinking back to those past times and saying that it must have been our fault when really we didn't set things up correctly in the first place. So we need to be able to change that behavior entirely. Tangent, long rant. There you go.
I wanted to share in the chat the session of the researcher from Toronto University who explained all the really nice learning techniques and how spacing learning works and some retrieval practices. And it's just, must see for anyone interested in microlearning because she shares some real life examples and shares some research behind it in very, very simple way. So highly recommended. It's in the chat. And, I also thought that probably when speaking about some use cases of microlearning, we should highlight the bad examples because that can be even more enlightening for a person who is looking to incorporate it. And I have a story that I heard from my best friend. She actually was assigned to cybersecurity course, and that training should result in kind of a one-on-one assessment as far as I got it. So she was meant to kind of learn the topic properly, right? And she got an e-learning module, nicely decorated with, some characters, of course, with lots of drag and drops and click and to reveal options, like highly interactive course. And since she was really looking forward to learning the main aspects and doing great at the final assessment, she struggled because she couldn't understand what was the most important things there. And what she did, she just highlighted some text and she screenshotted the main phrases and she made up kind of a plain text-based document. And that was her resource to prepare for the assessment. And after that, she shared, I don't know, probably someone asked about her experience with that e-learning module. She shared that resource in their corporate Slack channel. And everyone was so excited about that because it was kind of a plain instruction on what you should learn. And, probably the authors of that initial asset were thinking like creating something that is so very interactive and gamified and, looking pretty nice. It was the right way to deliver information, but in fact, it was not. And a person, and not even one person, actually, the team preferred just to kind of have some easy to digest, snackable ideas of what they should actually know. And that's very important. When you think about, creating some engaging experiences, make sure you think of the right engagement and try to make sure that everything you use, especially when it comes to microlearning, some very quick learning assets, that everything is meaningful and purposeful, because otherwise such interactions, such, gamified techniques may work as, speed bump. And what they actually do, they slow down the learner from getting the information they need. And another kind of a bad example, I sometimes kind of hear from our clients who reach out to me, sharing their ideas on how they are looking forward to use 7 tabs, is when you try to kind of cut down the existing, let's say 1 hour long e-learning course into lots of pieces and thus call it microlearning. It doesn't work that way, because a true piece of microlearning has only one outcome per activity. And when you simply cut down that existing material, all the learning objectives are still in place. And probably I should share a kind of a vivid example. If you have a $100 bill and for some reason you decide to tear it into some, I don't know, some pieces. What you have as a result, you have some pieces of your kind of a bill, right? And you can't do anything with it unless you probably go to the, I don't know, bank and change it for a new bill. But you can take some, I don't know, $20 bills, and they still can make up 100. You can go and buy something. They are self-sufficient. They can help you to learn better. And that's how it works. So don't try kind of just to literally go and divide your existing content into, hundreds or dozens of kind of assets. It's not microlearning. Microlearning should be designed intentionally. And if you just feel that you have such a need to kind of probably make the learning interactions shorter, then you need to redesign, to rethink the existing content. That's how it works.
That's such a good point. And I also really like that example of that's such a brilliant analogy. It's awesome. There's David here asked a question which I think is quite interesting, and it takes me. I know I'm gonna derail us a little bit, but it takes me back to kind of like the definition again. And I think one of the opportunities where maybe the distinctions between microlearning and deeper learning is where deeper learning gives people the opportunity to practice. And especially when we're trying to learn a new skill, practice is really important, right? You need to perform the action a few times and then get feedback when you're not doing it right. And sometimes you need a lot of detailed feedback. So to kind of like dig into that question, I think that a high level of facilitated or facilitate engagement and detailed feedback on your precise actions is a really big distinction. At least what I think. I do think that microlearning can give really good feedback, but I'm curious about its limitations, I guess. And sorry to derail us again. Maybe this can take us to the next question, which is about Kate. Sorry. I have to give you an opportunity to respond. Please go ahead.
I thought that probably some people confuse two terms, microlearning and micro-content. And that's where the questions actually come from. Probably we should say the difference between them. One standalone learning byte is not microlearning, or not yet. By default, it's rather micro-content. And microlearning, just as I see it, as any conventional macro learning, also includes such elements as practice, feedback, reflection, and let alone metrics. So it's actually up to you and up to your up to the way you design that microlearning experience and the way you see it fits into your existing training strategy, whether it has the potential to become micro-content or micro-learning. Because you can always ask people in the end of even a very short microlearning asset, whether that piece of information was useful to them, whether they are open to, recommending it to their colleagues, or I don't know, you can put kind of a form in the end and ask if you'd like to share some, answer some question, share the similar case study you previously faced, or kind of share some thoughts and feedback. You can always do some one-on-one things and assessment, because I'm actually the fan of making a strategy out of everything. When you kind of see the things as a standalone assets, they don't make much sense.
I like that. It should be part of a like a larger campaign. And in the beginning of this, when we set up this session, we were kind of joking about how we were going to set up a fake fight and then just all agree that microlearning and deep learning can work really well together. And I think that if we think about it as like an overall strategy or an overall campaign, they can be so complementary. The two different ways to, to reinforce something that, let's say there was like a long workshop with cooperative learning exercises and stuff, and then a few weeks later you send out a micro-learning activity where someone, reinforce that activity. I'm just buzzing with ideas about how we can even now reinforce or execute these ideas. That's really cool. Tara, is it okay if I pitch the next question?
Yeah, go for it.
Maybe, that takes us to the final thing, is like, what can deeper learning learn from microlearning? How can we, as creators of learning experiences, do things better thanks to the innovations and thanks to the way we've changed the way we think about learning that came from the microlearning space? What can we learn, I guess?
I could take in. I haven't talked in a while. So what I would say, William, is that if we're thinking more about from the deeper learning perspective, because that is where I would say, honestly, that is more of my sweet spot, because when I'm designing things as an instructional designer, I'm thinking about courses and programs and trainings, and I'm thinking about those different types of things, which always are going to have some type of end goal in mind. So trying to be able to steer people towards that direction. One of the things I love to be able to do within my own courses is actually type of like a micro learning activity, if you will, where at the end of the entire week, what I love to be able to ask folks, because Kate mentioned about reflection, and that's literally what I put at the very end of the week as a reflection activity, because for a lot of adults out there, what they typically do is that they get through a week and then say like, oh, thank God that week is done, never using that again. And then they move on to the next week. And it's like, wait, hold on, like, what did you just learn about? Like, stop and pause and think and reflect upon all the things that you just heard. How are you going to be able to use this information into your life? Or you can go back in time to a past experience. How would you change that with what you know now? And the point with that one, and why I'm calling that micro learning in a sense, is because that is like a real-time thing that pops up right at the end of the week. And that was designed in particular for that learning sequence, but that should be coming at the end, because before you move forwards, I want you to stop, pause, think, and reflect about all those things that you just went through before you just keep on diving on in ahead. And if you do that, and if you do that correctly, you're going to keep on building upon a type of a continual loop with applying prior knowledge and continuing to use that again and again and again and time again as you work through with something. And perhaps that is a course going into another course, into eventually into an overall type of a degree, or for a program, or for 4 courses in a row to make up a certificate, or something along those lines. So once again, you can definitely do that, but of course it should be intentionally designed into the overall picture and with the right timing of things. If that makes sense. I'm seeing some yeses in the chat, so I think so. All right, it's a thumbs up. Hey, all right, so there we go.
And actually,
Awesome. Oh, go ahead, Kate.
I keep an eye on the chat, and I saw a great example from Emilia about deeper learning can kind of present kind of a 12-module chemical engineer course, but then you can always, create some follow-up things, or you can even between those module sessions, explain some concepts, some basic concepts. And I'd agree with you, Emilia. Kind of a microlearning really shines when you deliver some probably not simple subjects, because it's very, very objective what to kind simple. Probably it can be simple to a lawyer when we deliver some, terms and case study, but it's not that simple to me personally. Or when we talk about some chemical engineer stuff, probably there are some things that are pretty plain for the people in the industry, and they see them as simple. So it all comes down to the context. And when you design microlearning, just think whether it fits the context. You have that very, very tiny learning objective. you build your asset around that objective, and a person either has some knowledge of that, I don't know, stuff you delivered, or they are kind of equipped to go and do something. Personally, I stand for going and doing something because I'm coming from the learning and development consulting, and I understand that every company actually wants and is looking for to changing behaviors and to becoming more effective, efficient, and so on. And that's why actually no one is hired to go through learning. People are hired to do their job tasks, to operate perfectly. And we are all here to help them to succeed in that. That's why if your microlearning asset kind of addresses that very tiny thing and helps people do their job better, call it microlearning, call it, I don't know, any other word. If it's short and targeted and call into action, that's microlearning.
I love it. I feel like we're close to the end of time, so I want to give everyone like your last word, your last little snippet, and then we'll get into some of the logistics. We've got a bunch of questions, which I think we'll put into a conversation for later. But yeah, last word, William, Kate, Luke.
Yeah, I just want to jump in with a final thought from what I was thinking. What can I learn from microlearning? So in web design, there's this term, like this distinction between how we would design websites. So the first one was they called it graceful degradation. So you design the desktop version of the website first, and then from there you shrink it down, and then you remove things to make it fit into the mobile version. And the other philosophy is called progressive enhancement. We start with the mobile first version, and then you build it out to make it. You just add features and you add things and columns and stuff. But the idea is that the core functioning of the website in a progressively enhanced website, it works perfectly well in that small space. And when it comes to what I've learned from kind of this discussion, and what I've been thinking about a lot recently, is that we should be thinking about, from the deeper learning context, we should be thinking about this progressive enhancement context. If we are designing a module or a section in a course, maybe even a video or a lecture or whatever, we have to think about how would this fit into like a 10 to 20 slide 7 taps activity. What are the most important things that we want to communicate? And then once we've established that, then we can add those extra bits of information, and then progressively or build out, maybe include more exercises, discussion activities, things like that. So I had a really nice moment here where I just everything kind of clicked together. Yeah, I think that's kind of my favorite, my final note.
Well, then my final note would be just microlearning is a great way to deliver some ideas and concepts and to change the behavior of your learners, but it should not be used just because everybody is using it. It should fit the strategy. It should, come as a great companion to your existing training. Sometimes you really need, some longer materials. You need to let people immerse themselves into some kind of a conventional, probably 1 hour long webinars. There is nothing bad about them. Or sometimes there should be some instructor-led training, and that's necessary for some topics. That's absolutely okay. But if you feel that the concept can be distilled to its essence and it can be really short, and your learners would love to keep it simple, plain, and short, then that's a nice opportunity for microlearning. I see lots of companies who use 7 tabs. They have all the great tools on their shelves, and they have just beautifully designed content. But from time to time, they either don't have time to resort to creating something long, or they need to address some smaller training needs, or they need just to follow up quickly to make sure that everyone has that, instruction of how to give feedback after a long e-learning session, but no one using that feedback technique, and thus they deliver kind of a 7 taps instructions to all the managers in a company. And that's why they resort to microlearning. So think of it as a kind of a not something brand new and not something that should be kind of opposed to a deeper training stuff. Like, it's something that works as a strategy. That's all.
Gotta take myself off on mute there. The last thing that I wanted to mention, because we didn't have enough time to talk about it, and I just wanted to throw that thing out there, is that a lot of the questions I keep on reading about, not just from today, but also like in general with things, is how do you know if this is working for you? As far as for like, how do you know if microlearning is working? And the answer to that is the answer to literally everything that I talk about as far as for designing learning experiences, is to get feedback and see what people think, and do you actually hit the goals? You need to be able to evaluate that. And oftentimes people are like, I want to be able to immediately implement this. And then when am I going to see changes? And it's just like, well, wait, hold on. Like, we can do a pilot program. We can test things out. We can see if people actually enjoy it. If they do, let's do it more. If they hate it, let's go back to the drawing board. Can we revise it? Can we make it better? Can we just do some fine tweaks and tunings to get things right? Because oftentimes that's usually it, is that you need that feedback to be able to guide you down the right path. And whether it's going to be students or learners, adults, employees, whoever, you can always collect feedback and try to find better ways of designing learning experiences. And this pertains to microlearning or macro learning. And I saw in the chat too, people are talking about adaptive learning and scenario-based learning and all that. Anything. Feedback is useful for literally every single thing that you do. It's going to help you out. So I beg of you, if you go forth and start doing micro learning and all the things that you do, please ask for feedback and get it in both ways if possible, both qualitative and quantitative, because the more data, the better. It's really going to be able to help you out. And that's how I design all my learning experiences, with whatever type of learning strategy or technique that I actually do. So just do that.
I'll just try to stop myself from adding some comments on evaluating microlearning assets, because it should be kind of another topic for another great session. I have lots of stuff to share, but just as an addition to what Luke said, I absolutely agree with you. Microlearning actually is very close to the moment when a person actually needs to apply that knowledge. And sometimes you don't really need any metrics, rather than see whether people start, operating the facility properly. Now, do you know if there are any new errors that occur? And that's how you can evaluate whether that piece of training was successful or not. So microlearning can be presented in various ways, and given the context, given the particular use case, there could be some different types of evaluation. But of course, without evaluation, actually, I don't know, learning doesn't make much sense for me personally. So yes, microlearning should be evaluated. It can be evaluated, whether it's feedback or another way of, gathering information about whether it was successful or not. But you just should feel that there should be some evaluation process afterwards, always.
Amazing. Thank you all, William, Luke, Kate. We really appreciate it. If other people want to say thanks in the chat, feel free. I did put our resources there, but I feel that this conversation could continue. And so we're going to send out a mini course to you via email. So it'll include the recording from this session, and then we'll find some way to incorporate those questions that you had in the chat, maybe some discussions that we can continue having even after this session. And so I promised that we could do our very fun little bit where if you want to come off mute and say thank you and goodbye, you can. And so I just gave you the power. And so if you'd like to, you can come off mute and say thank you or goodbye or have a nice day or whatever.
Thank
Thank you all.
you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Woohoo!
I
That's
just turned my
awesome.
volume all the way down. I was like, it's going to be so loud. But it wasn't. It was fine.
It was good. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks, folks. Thank you,
Awesome.
Tara. Thank you, William.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Kate.
everyone.
Great chatting with all of you. This is fun.
Yeah, likewise. It was good to see your face, Jason. I
Thank you so
remember
much.
from that course. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us.
Yeah, good seeing you. It's been a while. It's been a
Cheers.
while. Cheers. Bye.
Cool. Bye. Cool. Okay, I'm gonna
Awesome.
save this chat and then end the call. Again,
Perfect.
thanks so much, Kate and Luke. I think this was a really fun session.
This was so fun. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Thank
Kate, you were fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. You're way too humble.
Yes.
I just think that we could really go on and go on, you know, just because the topic, I'm passionate about it. I can,
Yeah.
as I mentioned, I can be easily carried away. So I'm really looking forward if you have any other great ideas on, you know, speaking about microlearning. I'm happy. Just, you know, this group was really nice. Luke, thank you so much. I just, you know, kind of enjoyed even listening to you because I love the way you share your ideas. Not everyone does it like, you know, in such a easy to digest way with that, you know, pleasing tunes. So thank you so much for being my panelist today.
I think Luke already left, but
Oh.
yeah. I also like how he'd asked people in the chat to share the experience. That was really good. Yeah. Again, thank you. I'm gonna sign off now, and then we'll catch up on LinkedIn. Have a good
Sounds
day.
good. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.